Crashbots is a top-down runner/shooter, and it seems to be equal parts both. It's worth noting that although this is a runner, it's not an endless runner. It does have an endless mode, but there are very much individual levels with individual preset obstacles to uncover. The mechanics are fairly standard, even if some of them aren't exactly familiar. You have a shot, you have a slide, you have a jetpack to vault over obstacles, and you have an ultimate attack which varies depending on which robot you are using. The environmental hazards stand out a bit to me because of these floor icons, which when you touch activate a certain ability. For example, they might speed you up, pause your character entirely, or even just outright damage you. Another thing that makes the hazards interesting to interact with is the fact that although this is a runner, it is not technically lane-based, as you can move in between lanes without snapping to them. Now personally, I prefer this. I like having full 3D control instead of just snapping between lanes, but I realize this is a preference thing, so I'm warning you ahead of time in case you can't already tell that, it's full 3D control and not snap-based control. Now the game would be reasonably difficult as is. The obstacles are interesting to avoid. I haven't seen some of them in Endless Runners before. The ability to speed up, use a jetpack, and slide, which also gives you a slight speed boost. That's plenty enough by itself, but adding the shooting mechanic in there allows for some really decent variety, especially given that each level is handmade by the developer to, have specific unique obstacles to overcome. But there's a little extra something I haven't mentioned yet that makes the game way harder than it would be normally. In addition to all the mechanics I previously mentioned, your character has an energy meter, and the energy meter depletes not just when they get hit, but when they are walking, when they are using their jetpack, when they are sliding, and, of course, when they take damage. So you have a meter that's constantly depleting while you play, and if you try to use any evasive maneuvers, it will deplete much more rapidly. There are ways to refill the energy meter by picking up batteries or lightning bolts, but you kinda have to gamble, because that crate you busted open may have an energy bolt in it, or it may have a spike. The game would already be reasonably challenging by itself without the energy meter mechanic, if the energy meter were just replaced with a health bar, because the hazards are placed in such a fashion that the game already requires an impeccable sense of rhythm and requires a lot of memorization and lightning-fast reflexes. In a lot of ways, the colorful graphics, types of environments, and scathing difficulty reminds me a lot of Bit Trip Runner. It's not really a similar game, per se, but the difficulty in graphics just give me that vibe. And it's probably worth saying that because of the inclusion of the energy meter mechanic, this game actually proved kind of too difficult for me to handle. Now, I have a much higher tolerance for difficulty than most people I know, and I like getting my ass handed to me, especially by games that have full 3D movement, so I feel like I have more control over what's going on. But this game is merciless. I've been cherry-picking the amount of times I didn't get my ass wrecked, but if I showed you all the times I got my ass wrecked, then the footage would be like quadrupled right now. In spite of it being too difficult for even me to handle, I really can't think of anything particularly wrong about the core design. Yes, it's incredibly sadistic and obviously for masochistic people, but that's kind of the appeal, I think. The developer should probably put more emphasis on the reaction required and the difficulty, because you have to have an obscenely good reaction time, and this game is going to put most people off almost immediately. Even the tutorial could be a bit too much for some people. That being said, I want to make it clear there are many things that do not factor into the difficulty of the game. One of those being the perspective. The perspective of this game, perfectly fine. I have not once taken unfair damage because of the perspective, nor have I thought the perspective got in the way of what I was doing. Whenever I got hit, it was just because I sucked ass at what I was doing. Secondly, the controls in this game also fine. Have had no issues with the controls whatsoever. So I can't really say I think there's anything wrong with the game on a fundamental level, but I do understand that the actively antagonistic hazard placement and ridiculous difficulty may put off a lot of people. Then again, I guess that's kind of the point.